I'm always fascinated with the idea of dreams and how while you're laying there asleep, your brain keeps moving and keeps ticking, and oftentimes these wonderful and sometimes terrifying things occur to you. The most terrifying dreams I've ever had are the ones where I am trying to wake up. Something about the world around me in the dream does not make sense. It seems to be false, and because of that, I know I have to wake up. I'm asleep and I'm trying to wake up. Sometimes I'll be stuck in bed and I'll try yelling, but no sound comes out from my voice. Or sometimes it'll seem as if I'm walking around the house, desperately turning on lights, putting flashlights up to my eyes, making lots of noise, doing everything I can to stay awake and not fall back asleep. But in that dream, I still fall asleep and wind up back in my bed again. And I still try to get up and wake up and do something. It's really unnerving when this happens, but I know that the world is false. And maybe that's why in these dreams, I want to wake up. I mean, I've had great dreams, don't get me wrong. I've had dreams where I've been flying, I've had dreams where I've had all sorts of superpowers, and this, that, and the other thing. But when I wake up from them, I know that they're fake. And so when you wake up sort of in the midst of a dream and you realize that you're dreaming, it seems off. It seems strange because even though everything looks normal, even though everything seems to be exactly how it should, it's not. And we know in the pit of our guts when this happens that the world is false. And perhaps that's the crux of those moments, the message behind those dreams. When one can see through the veil, oftentimes what we see then is the truth, the actual truth, the way things actually are. Now, we as people, we don't like fake things, at least not all the time. We want the genuine truth. We want things to be real, and we want things to be authentic. And sometimes, even if the truth is hard, that's what we want, because it's real. The truth is this one thing, the way that reality is supposed to be. Because it's the truth, that's what we need. Because it's this real, authentic moment in the world. You can't fake the truth, or at least you can't fake the truth for too long. Sometimes it's not exactly what we want, but it's what we need. And it, again, is the very basic thing, the reality of the world. We want that reality. We crave that reality. We crave for the real, authentic experiences in our lives. But if the truth is something that is hard for us to handle, if it's something that makes us stop and think about ourselves and introspect ourselves, sometimes we have to wonder, do we really want the truth? Do we really want to know the way the world is? Or would we rather just accept a comforting lie that agrees with us, that affirms everything we believe in and everything that we're doing? Is that what we really want simply because it's easier? I would argue, and I believe that the Bible would argue, that the harsh truth is better than any sort of easy lie. And the simple reason is because it's the truth, because it's real, it's what is actually going on. It's nice to pretend, and when I play with my kids, it's great when I get to be the hero and we do all sorts of fun adventures, but when the time to play is over, I have to get back to the real world. I can't be a space ranger or a zombie hunter all the time. I have real world responsibilities that I have to take care of. Even though it's fun, even though it's exciting, I know I have to get back to reality. And the Bible wants us to get back to reality. Maybe that's why Jeremiah had such a hard time being a prophet. One of his jobs as a prophet was to speak to people on behalf of God. And that's all well and good. It's very fun, it's very easy, some would say, to be a prophet and to speak for God. Except when the word is not a good word. Except when the word is a harsh word. When it's the abject truth. The actual, authentic truth. When the message is that God is upset and you have to be the one to deliver that message, that everything is not all sunshine and rainbows, that life is hard, this is hard, and y'all done goofed. When you have to give that message, that's not gonna be a good time. It's the essence of this sort of new age-like movement of people hearing what they want to hear instead of going to a house of worship to be challenged. They go to have themselves affirmed, to hear that everything is in fact sunshine and lollipops and rainbows and puppy kisses and warm fuzzies and all of this good things. Except it's not exactly the truth. Sometimes it's a hard thing for people to tell the truth. And Jeremiah had the job of speaking the hard word to the people. In fact, his life was put in danger because of it. He does not like his job, but yet he finds himself that this is the only thing he can do because he is speaking for the Lord. People hated him because he spoke the truth. His message was not happy. In fact, in our Old Testament reading today, his message is so unhappy that he is writing about how upsetting it is to him personally. You see, Jeremiah he knows what the truth is. He knows exactly what God wants him to say. He knows exactly what the people are supposed to hear. And yet when he gives this message, when he tells them the truth, he is made out to be the villain. He is made out to be the bad guy. And so in our passage this morning from Jeremiah, he weeps. But he doesn't just weep for the sake of his own self. No, he weeps for the people. He understands that this is a hard message that he has, but they just aren't listening. They don't seem to get it. Jeremiah's grief is the grief that he shares with the people, but his grief is doubled because he knows if they would just sit down, shut up, and listen and do what they were supposed to do, that everything would be fine. And yet instead of that, what do the people do? They attack the messenger because they don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear that they did something wrong. They don't want to hear that they are being punished for something they have done. Instead, what they do is they project their feelings. They project their anger and their insecurities all on Jeremiah, who has to take all of this and bring it inside of him and swallow it and live with it. Because that's the job of the prophet no one else ever talks about. And so Jeremiah's grief is so massively big, all because he was doing what God wanted him to do. And all he wanted them to do was to wake up, to see the truth of the matter. He says, "Oh, that my head were a spring of water, and my eyes a fountain of tears, so that I may weep day and night for the slain of my poor people. If only I could cry forever and ever and ever," he says, "because of how badly my people have been treated." But he knows why it's happening. And he knows how to fix the problem. But nobody wants the truth. They want to stay wrapped up in the cozy cocoon of their blankets and their sleep. And they want to say, "No, it's not my problem. I didn't do nothing wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. Someone is picking on me. Someone is making my life so much harder than it actually should be." And Jeremiah's like, "No! Wake up. See the truth. See exactly what is going on in the real world." And this brings us, in a sense, to the most confusing parable in the entirety of the New Testament. Let me Insider trading tip here, folks. When this passage comes up in the lectionary, pastors collectively do this sort of, because it's hard. It's a hard passage to preach on. It's a hard passage to dissect. And the reason that it's so hard to dissect is because when you look at it at itself, what you have is Jesus telling the disciples to be dishonest people, to make friends by dishonest means. And you have to stop and take a step back and say, no, wait a minute here. Okay, this is the guy who for previous books and previous chapters has been hooping and hollering and going on about how nice we're supposed to be to everyone, how we should treat people the way we want to be treated, ate with the sinner and the poor and the outcast. So he did all of this just to gain what? Good clout with the people? But the thing is about this passage, you have to put it in the context with the rest of what's going on. And this starts way back in the 14th chapter of Luke. In this chapter, we find the context of the location of this passage. And bear in mind, this is why he's speaking this way. Way back in the 14th chapter of Luke, we find that Jesus is sitting at a table with a bunch of Pharisees. And so for these 2 chapters and a little bit beyond, what we see is Jesus telling these stories not simply to his disciples, but also to the Pharisees. He's sitting at a table, talking, eating, having possibly a good time, I don't know. But in the midst of all of this, Jesus is doing what Jesus does, and he teaches. And I would gather a sense at this point, maybe he understands, maybe he sees that these Pharisees, these people that he is trying to wake them up from their stupor, they're just not getting it. They're not following everything Jesus is saying, because everything Jesus is saying is sort of this crazy radicalized agenda. What do you mean we got to be nice to everybody? I mean we have to change how we think about God? We have to change how we worship God? And they're sitting there fretting and biting their fingernails because someone said the C word of change. And so Jesus sits and addresses the disciples. Now here's where things get interesting. You ever do that thing where you're talking to one person, but you kind of talk within earshot of another person so that they hear it? Because really, you're not trying to talk to the person you're talking to, but to the person who's eavesdropping in on the conversation. In a sense, that's what Jesus is doing here. And so what he does is he talks to the disciples. And he tells the disciples, he addresses the disciples, this story of this rich man who has a servant. And the servant isn't very good. So the master is going to fire him. The servant panics. He says, well, crud. Not only am I going to be out of a job, I'm not going to have money, I'm not going to be able to support myself, I can't take care of myself, I have too much pride in me to beg, he says. He says, so I have to set up a safety net. And so he goes to everyone who owes his master something. He says, all right, tell me what you got. What do you owe? He said, the first guy, he goes, I owe him 100 jars of oil. He says, all right, make it 50 and pay it off. And he's like, man, I could do 50. And so he does that. He goes to the next guy. All right, what do you got? What do you owe? He says, I owe him 100 bushels of wheat. He says, all right, take it. Can you do 80? 80 seems reasonable. Can you do 80? Yeah, I can do 80. And he goes and he says, all right, give that to him. It's like this debt consolidation thing where he doesn't necessarily gain anything of it, but what he can do then, when he gets fired, is he can go to these people and say, hey, remember that time I helped you out? You need to help me out, which is the whole reason he's doing this. He ain't doing this to be charitable. He ain't doing this to be nice. He's doing this to build up his clout, to build up himself, so that he may be able to get by. He's feigning niceness so that he has this safety and security. This is not a person you want to be like. And yet, as Jesus tells the story, when we see this story, what we see and what we hear is the master commending the servant. The master absolutely commends the servant. He says, look, the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than with the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. That's Jesus talking. And he says this. He says, you can cheat, you can lie, you can steal, whatever you have to do to get in with that in crowd, do it because they're doing it too. And you stop and you're like, wow, how can Jesus say this? But that's not the whole point of this passage. Because I'm sure the Pharisees are hearing this story and they're like, yeah, all right, I can do that. That's easy enough. Of course I can be dishonest. Of course I can lie and cheat and steal and do all these things. That's easy. I can be shrewd. And if I'm shrewd, then I'll have some sort of reward at the end of all things. But he's telling this story about the shrewd manager getting praised for being shrewd and being dishonest. But I really don't think Jesus is lifting up this shrewd manager as someone we want to be like. Because the next thing that he talks about, whoever is faithful with very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is faithful and dishonest in a very dishonest little is dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will trust you with the true riches? And he says, look, if you can't even handle being a good person with the stuff that you lied and stole and cheated to get, how are you going to be able to have the truth? And it's there this sort of light bulb starts to click, and the light shines through and eyes start opening. He's not saying this story to praise people who act like this. He's literally telling this story in earshot of the Pharisees and telling the disciples, don't be like those schmucks over there. Do the right thing. Do what you are supposed to do. And he ends this passage with something that is very condemning. No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. And if that is the case, if this is the truth, then everything that came before, this entire story, needs to be called into question. If a person cannot have this great love for both money and God, if a person is unable to do that, then we understand then that Jesus is not saying you can do whatever you want, the ends justify the means. Instead, he is saying, don't do it. It's like, you ever have someone who says something really shocking or appalling or provocative just to get people to understand, to wake things up, just to shake things up, to wake people up? That's, in a sense, what's going on here. As Jesus is using this story, he's crafting this narrative, and what's he doing? He's drawing the Pharisees in. He's drawing these people in to hear it, thinking, oh, I could do that. That's so simple. And then he takes it and he flips the script on him, and he says, you people need to wake up, because obviously I don't want you to do that. Obviously, I don't want you to be doing this. He says, if you can't be faithful with these temporary things, How can you be faithful with the real truth? If you're going to lie and cheat and steal to get your riches, and you have knowledge of the ultimate riches found in God through Jesus Christ, if you have this understanding, but you're not honest and you're dishonest with these little things, how then am I expecting you to be honest with the truth? And that's what Jesus is saying. It serves as this cautionary tale about not being like those people, not being like that. Jesus is saying, go ahead. Be like this if you want. Act however you want. Do what it takes. Step on the little people. Climb your way to the top. But Jesus says, if you do, you will never reach the truth. You'll just keep repeating the same mistakes over and over and over in some terrifying loop-like scenario. Because you don't know the truth. This is peace. Knowing the truth, knowing what the real truth is. Understanding that. It ain't an easy truth. It's by no means an easy truth, because the truth of the matter is all of us are sinners, but nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear a pastor get up on every Sunday morning and say, y'all are sinners. We're all sinners. Nobody likes to hear that over and over again, but it's the truth. Ain't a good truth. Because if that's the truth, then that means that there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with all of us. And if there's something wrong with us, that means we got to do work. And the question is, do we want to get out of bed and put the work in? Or do we want to stay wrapped in our cozy, warm little blanket of sin, saying, I'm fine, really. I'm fine, you're fine. Everything is fine and nice and comfortable. It ain't the truth, though. It's not the truth of the matter. So our problem is, we gotta wake up. We have to wake up. Because this is what Jesus wants for us. Jesus declares that He is the truth. When asked, what is truth? Famously, what does He declare? I am the way, the truth, and the life. That is what Jesus says about Himself. And if this is true, then we don't have to necessarily understand the truth. We have to understand Jesus. And in understanding Jesus, we will understand the truth. The real crux of reality, how the world really is. We can't be fond of the dreams because they're nice and comfortable, because we know that there's something wrong with them. There's an amazing theory called Uncanny Valley, and it deals with robots and computer-generated images. And basically, what it is that the closer something that is artificial looks to being real, as long as you can tell it's artificial, it's fine. But the moment that it gets too real, the moment the robot moves too fluid, the moment the computer graphics are indistinguishable from something real, we get unsettled. And we don't know exactly what it is. Scientists haven't been able to figure it out. But it's because we know our brain is registering this thing as this is realistic, and yet I know in my heart of hearts this is fake. And so we do this thing where it gets really weird and uncomfortable. And they call that moment of weirdness, that feeling of uneasiness, the uncanny valley. We don't want that. We want everything to be the truth, to be real, and to be authentic. So wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up to the world. Wake up to your place in the world. Wake up to what you do. And most importantly, wake up to the truth that is found in Jesus Christ. We must be shaken from our stupor. We must do this every so often so that we can realign ourselves with Jesus, so that we can walk in his light, that we can walk in the truth. Amen.